in response to an avalanche from the cities where this is getting shown at this time, certain mail does come in, not just the ones that Kyroots makes up reports on, asking why we refer to this as the revolution as opposed to, and they don't really know, but it's opposed to. If you got any name you want, serious or otherwise, I could very quickly say, well, why is it called the revolution as opposed to a tuna fish sandwich? I figured some of you would laugh. But it could have been called as opposed to the great modern mystical quest, which you think sounds more serious, which shows what a simple sense of humor most of you have. The tuna fish sandwich would get a laugh, and contemporary mystical quest will not. The Southern people will go, oh. Gives Kyroots and I a fair indication of the kind of audience with whom we have to deal. But I would just quickly, since we never have a preface and no glossary, no index, no credits on the show, we just kind of picked out the term revolution as opposed to evolution on the basis that an individual life is too short ordinarily for the individual himself or herself to observe evolution. And so if there is something possible, it would be, as opposed to evolution, being too large, too grand a scale for the individual to see in his lifetime under ordinary mental conditions, then it would be a revolution as opposed to that. There would have to be something, not out in the streets, not trying to change the city, not trying to change other people. It would be within his individual lifetime existence that the person did something extraordinary enough that he literally changed. And although Kyroots keeps hinting around, may I even hint, it's not changed like, by God, I lost 20 pounds. Wonderful. Hey, I quit smoking. May I suggest we're talking about some kind of serious change that may not be real easy to do. But you understand that evolution on a larger scale, and just with no great personal emphasis or diagnosis, that evolution would not have to do with all of humanity changing their habits, that all of humanity suddenly went into the Betty Ford Clinic and got rehabbed. As opposed to that, you would understand just at the general level of the term evolution, you're talking about changes in the genetic structure of some species. Hint, hint. And someone said, hint, hint, hell. All right, that kind of attitude would just go on. So much for the intro. See? We were last talking about how life in man's secondary intellectual world grows in an omnidirectional manner and is thus, in a real sense, operating at maximum efficiency. And how this expansion thus frees life and man's secondary expansion from certain limitations. That if you're growing like from a single point and going in all possible directions, that life, as science would theorize it right now, cosmologically speaking, and as I was suggesting to you individually, looking at this as being your Big Bang, going in all possible directions, if expansion is omnidirectional, then it is freed from the kinds of limitations we mentioned, that you are freed from apparent growth in only one direction, which amounts to one time zone, which amounts to one history, and you're also freed from a single form of physics, thought, reason, which leads to some, shall we say, why not, some surprising results. See, now we're picking up where we left off. You understand that the guitar player has been sitting here for 2 nights holding that augmented chord so we could pick it back up. The surprising results in such matters as fathers beget sons, sons fathers. It happens You recall we mentioned that in relationship to this, that there is a truly archetypical, at least a supreme symbiotic relationship between life and man. And then on a lesser scale, but no less magnificent, is a similar symbiotic relationship between man and his own mind. So in regards to fathers beget sons, sons fathers, then in the kind of symbiotic relationship on the scale of a man and his own mind, if you would look at a man's intellect, then you could see it as being the original model for the phoenix. Do I have to do it again? Don't lose your place twice in a minute. But to begin with, of course, it's insane to say that fathers beget sons and sons fathers. Sounds like some kind of Zen notion that you got free in a box of cereal. That they decided, let's put out philosophy to astound people who get up early and eat cereal. Fathers beget sons, guys, sons fathers. I guess you could say, gee, Mom, look at this. And you think I'm crazy. Because, of course, it is insane. Trees do not produce roots, right? Trains cannot go backwards. Reason cannot go in reverse. Not without suffering severe tire damage. But have you already forgotten where we started tonight? That if you saw something from last time, that if, and you can picture this, whether you see it actually or can remember it long enough to observe it marching along beside you daily, you can mentally picture, all of you surely can, that if something was expanding, that if you were taking like the center of a balloon, just some non-physical center of it, and somebody, some way outside that finite system was blowing into it, and the balloon expands. Forget the balloon itself, but inside, the expansion of nothing is going in all directions. It's not all within conditions. It's not just here and there, every area you can draw. It's going from one center in all possible directions. If things are expanding in such a way, then you do understand. You've got to, you can see that. Then the expansion is obviously, perforce, by its own definition, by the way I described it, it is not limited to one direction. Now, standing in that center place, you can certainly, pick out one direction, which under ordinary conditions you have no see. Chicago, don't do that. Choice. Because the ordinary mind, even if you said, well, guy over here almost said chinchilla. But if it's going in all possible directions, and let's play geometrical, topographical game and say that the expansion would be in 360 degrees inside of a three-dimensional reality. And so if you're staying there, your mind in the center, and you see it as progress, which you got no choice, or you see it as change. Well, let's go ahead and say expansion. The ordinary mind, in that three dimensions, operating off of polarized energy, has no choice but to pick out one line somewhere. It doesn't matter what, but it cannot see any more than that. So it is limited, no matter what it says, no matter if it picks out an area and you pick out your own field, all the way from A to Z, from astronomy to zoology. Whatever it picks out is going to be limited to one line. But go back now to the picture. If it's expanding in all possible directions, then any direction it points out is not the only one. You'd have to say, all right. And if it's not the only one, then any line of reason to say, well, fathers beget sons, okay. But if it's not limited to that, then the irrationale, the insanity, the neural gut busting of saying that a son can beget a father, that progress is not in one direction, it is not in one dimension, it is not even in one history, that is, one time zone is going on simultaneously, then it's no longer insane. And then, of course, you can save a lot of money on bullets. That is, personal animosity. Remember? It was a Kyroot just early this evening. It is still this evening, isn't it? it would be that within your own neural system, this kind of symbiotic relationship to yourself would be the original model for the phoenix, the bird that rises from its own ashes. That you, of course, me talking about fathers and sons, is the big M. Somebody's going to say, the metaphor. We're not worried about sons actually giving birth to fathers. Give them a break. We don't have a population shortage. But remember some of the things where there was a Kyroot mentioned last time, that once you realize that all of life is bakery fresh, then you can no longer be that disturbed by the continual detection of individual aromas, which is another form of suddenly there you stand in the midst of Montana saying, somebody's feet stink. You can't do that. Montana, remember, the world is big enough for everybody. And once you understand that here you are, and you're in a bakery, freshly baked, is another way, may I suggest, that Kyroots was putting omnidirectional expansion. Don't look for any kind of particular significance between it just is. I mean, we made them both up, so I say it is. But don't waste your time saying, well, what is the mythical, literary, allegorical connection between the term freshly baked and omnidirectional expansion? None. Except I say there is. But if you suddenly realize that you and everyone else is born, and life itself at the secondary level is freshly baked, then no matter, we're not saying that you shouldn't or that you will not, but no matter the detection of individual aromas, what the hell does that mean? If life is freshly baked, and let's say that you, being the right thinking, blah, 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 that you are, as all good, right thinking, decent, educated, smart people do, adore French crullers and hate cream-filled donuts. Once you understand that all of life is freshly baked, then the periodic detection of the aroma of cream-filled donuts, what does that mean? What do you want? Give the doctor a break. The only way that you can get rid of that aroma is to burn down the bakery. You understand that? And a man says, wait a minute, you're talking about that kind of suicide attempt again. Not an attempt, sir, not an attempt. All you got to do is be able to have your way, that is, narrow down the omnidirectional expansion of life into one direction, and we don't have to talk about, in a speculative manner, suicide. No, sir. There's no question, it is not problematic. It's not in any doubt. So, while you stand in line waiting, here we go. Even more than 3 or 4 metaphors at one time into that cheap blender that they're selling. Remember the man in the alley? Are you ready? As the line stands and everybody's waiting to go over the hill to that great abattoir, which is a kind of bakery turned sideways. As everybody's waiting in line, there you are, you were born there, and just about the time you realize I'm born there, you realize, wait a minute, I'm going to die here. Over the hill, there goes everybody. And you think, well, I smell something bad. It's cream-filled donuts. Well, wait a minute, if we could do away with that, I wouldn't mind it so bad. Well, it's possible. It is possible. Suicidal, but possible. Now I'm saying possible in 2 or 3 sets of quotation marks. Because the only way, of course, that a man could actually commit that kind of fully comprehensive suicide would be to kill life. And if you believe that you can hurt life, then you're not, of course, one of the men that were part of that grand tradition of last time when Kyroots recount about a man who the punchline was, you got to remember the rest, who said, wait a minute, you mean I'm supposed to take indifference as a threat? Do you remember the setup? That was the punchline. Well, right over the hill is what? The Grim Reaper? A burnt down bakery? How about living malignant indifference? Tying all of this, believe it or not, partially together with some other things we're talking about. That inside of your own, how about a 4th one, solar system / bakery, you cannot get all hung up, all stymied over the appearance of a particular comet or satellite or some exotic, unsolicited pastry or aroma. And so while it is true within the symbiotic relationship, well, it's actually back to one, but some of you may not. Back to the symbiotic relationship a man has with his own mind, then there is no doubt through all of this that you have got to learn how to climb up on your own shoulders and then how to jump off. You got to know how to do that. But simultaneous with all of this, you have also got to understand that there is a limit to what the collective has made your mind to be, that you cannot eat yourself into a stupor off the food that the collective has provided. No. The symbiotic relationship. It makes no sense, but you can ultimately, but you can verbally take the sentence, all right, a man and his mind has a symbiotic relationship. All right, in that sense, the man's mind, his apparent individual mind, which is a, should we say sham? All right, say it. Sham. His apparent individual mind is in some way feeding off of itself. The man is the hippo and the hippo bird. And of course that makes no sense. Wait a minute. You cannot climb on your own shoulders. You can't pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Well, I didn't make up these terms. You people did. Before you got here and lost your way, you used to say things like, well, one thing about it, by God, since I don't qualify for welfare, I'd believe that a man's got to pull himself up by his own bootstraps. You used to say that. Don't blame it on me just because I point out that that's insane. Well, it is now that I think about it, but if I don't think about it, it's not. So I can say the man, life itself in man has some sort of symbiotic relationship. And everyone can say, well, yes. Even religious people, if they came to their senses for us momentarily, they could say, well, I see what you mean. And then say, all right, then a man his mind does. And they could go, I like the sound of that. A man in his own mind has a certain symbiotic relationship. A hippo and the hippo bird. Okay. Except for this. How the hell can a man have a symbiotic relationship with his own mind? Because if you got that far, then you go, wait a minute. That's almost as bad as saying a man's got to learn somehow how to climb up on his own shoulders and then jump off. Right? But now think. Up until the point that you even had some possibility of knowing how to think, what has your mind fed off of? Now, ordinary people would say, well, education, I went to school. Since I didn't know what to do, as per another Kyroot, I asked other people, what should I do? Now, all reason would tell you that you have learned from other people that if there is some sort of intellectual relationship between men, a large part of it, some part of it is between you and other people. That's how you learn. You go to school, you pay somebody, you solicit advice. We don't have long. Think about it. Is that true? I'll answer for you in your dreams. Well, in your dreams, unless, of course, you do realize that there is still many, many unanswered questions regarding the relative value and significance of heredity versus environment. You believe that you have learned from other people. Are we going to waste our precious time being this close to the weekend for me to say, all right, here we go, play begetting. Where did they learn it? Well, the man who taught me philosophy, I could only afford the University of Toronto. But my professor went to Harvard. Aha. And where did he go? How long do we have to take this? Are we going to finally get back that somebody was taught theology, if not accounting, by God himself? They do not look at it this way, but that is part of the basis. Another way to look at that little story of all the great creation stories being tied to verbiage, being tied to the gods or some force saying something. Because they, of course, do not look at it this way. But again, this is reflective of something that is at the very heart of the energy keeping the secondary world alive, and that is that is inferring, that is taking up, that is answering the question I just presented to you that the ordinary mind never can ask itself, and that is, all right, how did the first human, how did Adam find out the first thing? Well, God spoke to him. Then you got it. It's like we're all born in a finite reality. If we're all born in the closet, and we keep tracing our roots, and the roots never get outside the closet, then who had the first thought? Who had the possibility to think, and if just the possibility was nothing, they had to have a teacher. Somebody had to say, all right, at least one word, which of course is not true. It has to be two words. But you understand, these kind of creation stories tied to forces and gods outside the system, or that they were somewhere else and then made this system, they always do it. The cruder the people, the further back in dimensional history you go, the gods always, of course, got superhuman powers, obviously. And so they do fancy stuff like, make it lightning and thunder and then stop. And traffic lights hang up for, 2 hours at a time. They do physical things. But that isn't what gets man going. They can do the physical things and make hippos and hippo birds and attorneys and priests, but to start making decent humans, they have to speak. It has to get beyond the primary level into the secondary. Part of what that represents, part of what that does is answer the question which I presented to you, is where is the hole in the closet? Where is the original injection spot in the plastic doll that is humanity? How did the first piece of information get going? Simply, although it's of absolutely no importance to the ordinary mind, but you should see, like as having a test, like you're trying to decide whether I've proven it, you should simply see that under ordinary conditions, the question is to, where did I learn what I know? All you got to do is just start for a second. Well, where did they learn it? Where did they learn it? And it is a moot question. Or if you want the simple way, they didn't learn it anywhere. Which is another reason the mind can't deal with that, because you go, well, that's foolish. Because at one time, I knew nothing. And now I know something. And I did not simply, make it up. I didn't just find it under a rock. But then you got to say, all right, where'd they get it? Where'd they get it? Where'd they get it? And the mind just says, which this is always very close to, revolutions going, ooh. So the idea that sons can beget fathers, that you must indeed learn somehow to climb up on your own shoulders and then jump off, is not silly. And then on top of that, where I tried to back up to take care of some of the more astringent looks of disbelief a few minutes ago, was even though that be true, that in a sense, once you see it at the ordinary level, up until you get issued your own battle gear, that you're feeding yourself. That's not true, but it is as correct as saying, well, life has fed me. That's not untrue, but it's just as true to say I have fed myself. It would be more true to say, I don't know how I got fed. It'd be more true to say, one day, I suddenly kind of woke up and realized, God damn, I'm sitting here on a bus and I don't remember getting on it. I don't know where it's going. I don't know who these people are. In other words, I don't know anything, and it doesn't seem to have one thing to do, doesn't seem to interfere whatsoever with the normal course of this journey. Kind of on that basis, then, is what I'm inferring. It is, you can say, it's really a waste of time because this is the common belief. But you, as well as the ordinary rational mind, saying, anything I know, I learned. Or some variation there, it doesn't matter. As opposed to that, to turn it around and say, everything I know, I learned from me. I don't know how, but it had to be so. That's silly. But you understand, neither one of them are explanatory to any complex degree. They won't get you off the bus. They won't hardly get the window open so you can throw up every now and then. But it sure as hell will not get you off the bus. So back to where I was trying to take up for some of the quizzical looks. That although all of this is true, then in a sense, though, there comes a time on the bus, if you even realize it in this way, that, wait a minute, I'm here on the bus, in this box lunch I'm eating, everybody else seems to think somebody gave them theirs. And I used to, but nobody gave me this. I don't know where it came from, but I might as well believe that I packed it myself, which is silly. And I gave it to myself as I got on board, which is silly. But for them to think that somebody gave it to them is just as silly, because I see damn well that they didn't. Not just them, but me. So in a sense, there you are, bobbing along, trying to keep from getting sick, going along, eating a lunch that you packed yourself, climbing on your own shoulders, your own symbiotic relationship to your own mind, even though all that be true. There comes a point past which a revolutionist needs to quit eating. That is, stop this. No debate over it, but just stop eating this. There comes a point, you could say, in this kind of relationship to yourself, that although everyone is unavoidably born into a symbiotic, self-feeding intellectual relationship that is just insane to describe to ordinary mind, but it is a more valid lemming of the situation than it is to say that what I got. When I got on the bus, somebody gave me all this, and they've been teaching me all along the way. These other idiots, these other people throwing up and drinking gin and looking as dazed as a warthog that's been hit with a hammer. Yeah, they're teaching me, sure. You have to get crude when time's running out. Well, while everyone is unavoidably born into, everyone is constructed, everyone is produced inside of this neural system, everyone is already produced with a symbiotic relationship here. It is self-feeding, even though that's true, and it's unavoidable. The real revolutionist has eventually got to understand enough. It doesn't go anywhere. Not right or wrong. It is simply a symbiotic relationship to me. It is self-feeding. Nothing new can come in. The revolutionist must then, somehow, how about back to the bakery instead of solar system? You got to abandon the store. You got to move from the old neighborhood. You got to find a new line of work and a new place to eat. Because it's way beyond the point of thinking, if we were pointing at the city, if we were pointing to the bus drivers and other passengers, in other words, we were pointing to life, including Harvard and the church and everybody else. Boy, they misled me. Boy, are they idiots. Right. Now, let's remember, real expansion is not in one direction, so you got to be that good. All right, so whatever you say, idiots, nincompoops, all right, same deal. No matter how you describe it. If you describe what you have got, if you thought you received it from out there, and it's idiocy, it's incompetency on the hoof, it is folly, it is incomplete knowledge, anything you want to call it. Okay. But you have the same kind of relationship to you. And once you turn around, if you can see that, then this should take all of 10 or 15 seconds to realize, right, no better, no worse, same condition. So it's no longer simply that you have abandoned being critical of life and finding offense with the other individual aromas, but saying, you're thinking, well, it's my bakery. I don't want these fools in here. I know what's best. If you turn it back this way, then you realize that enough's enough, but not in that direction solely. Enough's enough in this direction. That is, just because you stuffed yourself for 40 years is no excuse for a revolutionist to continue to do so. Wait a minute, I heard that earlier from the Kyroots. Well, at least it didn't say just because you've been a dope for 40 years, there's no excuse to continue being one. When, of course, he didn't say that because we'd all, point out to him, you're wrong.